I watched them celebrate, believing they had just taken everything I had built. They didn't realize that in signing away my entire life, I was only setting the stage for their spectacular ruin. The air in the conference room was so thick you could have carved it into little blocks of resentment and sold them as souvenirs. On one side of the gleaming mahogany table sat my husband Mark and his new wife, Chloe. She was 26 with impossibly shiny hair and the kind of wide-eyed ambition that I remembered having before it was beaten out of me by 15 years of marriage and entrepreneurship. Mark had his arm draped casually over her chair, a smug, possessive gesture that was meant to look relaxed but screamed victory. His lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit named Mr. Davies, shuffled papers with performative importance. On my side, there was just me and my lawyer, Sarah, a woman whose perpetually worried expression had deepened into a canyon of concern over the past few weeks. She kept nudging a folder towards me, tapping a highlighted section with her pen. "Hope, please," she whispered, her voice tight with desperation. "Don't do this. The business alone is valued at 8 figures. We built it. You designed the logo on a napkin, for God's sake. The house, you planted every single rose bush in that garden yourself. This isn't just giving up, it's self-immolation." I offered her a small, placid smile. "I know, Sarah. It's all right." I looked across the table, my gaze landing on Mark. He wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on a point just over my shoulder, as if fascinated by the beige wall behind me. That was Mark's way. He could orchestrate the complete demolition of a life we'd built together, but he couldn't handle the quiet accusation in my eyes. Chloe, on the other hand, stared right at me. Her expression was a cocktail of pity and triumph. She was trying to look sympathetic, I think, but the sheer joy of winning was bubbling up and making her cheeks flush. "So," Mr. Davies cleared his throat, sensing the shift. "Are we in agreement, Mrs. Adams? You are willing to cede all shares of Innovate Dynamics and relinquish all claims to the property at 14 Willow Creek Lane?" "Yes," I said. My voice was even, calm. It didn't even tremble. Inside, a storm was raging, a hurricane of betrayal and grief. But on the surface, I was a tranquil lake. This calmness was my only weapon, and it was unnerving them. I could see it. Mark shifted in his seat. Chloe's smile faltered for a second. They had expected screaming. They had prepared for tears, for bitter recriminations, for a fight that would drag on for months, costing them a fortune in legal fees. They had not prepared for this, for surrender. All of it, I continued, my voice echoing slightly in the sterile room. The business, the house, the stock portfolio we started in 2010, the vacation condo in Florida. Sarah made a choked sound beside me. Mark's jaw tightened. This was more than he'd even dared to ask for in his most aggressive settlement proposal. He was getting everything. He was winning so completely, so utterly that it was starting to feel wrong even to him. "Hope," he started, finally looking at me. For a moment I saw a flicker of the man I married, a hint of confusion, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of guilt. "Are you sure? You don't have to." Chloe placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm, and the flicker vanished. He was hers now. "She knows what she's doing, honey," she cooed, her eyes narrowing at me. She thought this was a final act of a broken woman, a pathetic gesture from someone who knew they'd lost. Let her think that. "I'm sure," I said, picking up the heavy, expensive pen Mr. Davies had slid across the table. I didn't look at the pages. I knew what they said. They were a detailed inventory of my life, a list of everything I had poured my soul into, now being signed away with a flick of my wrist. I signed the first page. My signature was clean, steady. I signed the second, and the third. With each signature, I could feel the tension in the room changing. Their smugness was hardening into concrete certainty. Sarah's despair was settling into quiet defeat. When I was done, I pushed the stack of papers back to the center of the table. "There," I said softly. "It's done." Mark let out a breath he didn't seem to know he was holding. He grinned, a wide, predatory grin that was all teeth. "Well, I'm glad we could handle this amicably, Hope. It's for the best." He stood up, pulling Chloe to her feet. They were a unit. The winners. They were about to walk out to step into the house I designed and run the company I helped build from nothing. Mr. Davies was already packing his briefcase, the deal of a lifetime neatly concluded. They were at the door when my voice, still calm, still level, cut through their triumphant departure. "There is just one more thing." They all froze. Mark turned slowly, his smile gone, replaced by a wary annoyance. "What now, Hope? There's nothing left to discuss." "It's not a discussion," I said, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. I held it until he was the one to look away. "It's a condition of my generosity." I let the word hang in the air. "It's about Clause 11B of the Corporate Transfer Agreement, the annual audit." Mr. Davies frowned, pulling the document back out. "Clause 11B? That's just a standard forensic accounting review, a formality to ensure a clean transfer of books." "I know," I said, and for the first time that day, a genuine smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that promised a reckoning. "I want it conducted by the firm of Franklin & Bell, no one else. And I want the full, unredacted report sent directly to me, as a final courtesy." Mark scoffed, relieved. It was such a small, petty request. "Fine. Whatever you want. Have your little report." He waved a dismissive hand, eager to leave. He signed the addendum without even reading it. He had no idea. He had no idea what Franklin & Bell specialized in. He had no idea what they would be looking for. He thought he had taken my house, my company, my future. He didn't realize that in signing that one last piece of paper, he hadn't just given me a report. He had just handed me the key to his cage. The silence in the car on the way back to Sarah's office was heavier than the mahogany table had been. Sarah drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She kept glancing at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words for a language she didn't speak. Finally, parked outside her building, she turned to me, her face a mess of professional frustration and personal sympathy. "I don't understand, Hope," she said, her voice raw. 15 years of your life, your work, just gone. Why? What was that last bit about the auditors? Franklin & Bell? They cost a fortune. They're corporate piranhas." "Exactly," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "They're the best at what they do, and what they do is find things people don't want found." I gave her a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Trust me, Sarah, it was the best money I ever spent." I had paid their retainer from a small inheritance I'd kept separate from our joint accounts, my rainy decade fund, as my grandmother used to call it. It was pouring. The next 6 weeks were an exercise in radical downsizing. I moved out of our 5,000-square-foot home with its vaulted ceilings and into a small one-bedroom apartment above a flower shop. The scent of lilies and damp earth was a constant welcome presence. I sold my designer clothes, my jewelry, the car Mark had bought me for our 10th anniversary. I bought secondhand furniture and learned to enjoy the quiet simplicity of it all. Mutual friends would call, their voices dripping with pity. "We heard what happened," they'd say. "You're so strong. If there's anything you need." They thought I had been broken, that my quiet acceptance was the catatonia of a shattered woman. I let them think it. Meanwhile, Mark and Chloe were anything but quiet. Her Instagram became a shrine to their victory, pictures of them clinking champagne glasses on my patio, her posing in a bikini by my pool, a sickeningly sweet video of Mark carrying her over the threshold of my front door. The caption read, "Home is wherever I'm with you." The final post, the one that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time, was a picture of her sitting behind my old desk at Innovate Dynamics, her feet propped up. A nameplate that read, Chloe Daniels, VP of Development, gleaming in front of her. He hadn't just replaced me in his bed, he'd replaced me in the boardroom. I waited. Patience is a virtue I learned while tending to my rose bushes. Some things you can't rush. You prepare the soil, you plant the seed, and you wait for the right conditions to make it bloom. My conditions arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of an email with the subject line, F&B audit complete. Mr. Franklin was a small, meticulous man with spectacles that seemed to magnify the intelligence in his eyes. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He slid a thick, spiral-bound document across his desk towards me. Mrs. Adams, he began, his voice dry as old paper. You suspected financial irregularities. That's something of an understatement. He explained it to me in calm, devastating detail. For the past 3 years, Mark had been systematically bleeding Innovate Dynamics dry. He'd created a shell corporation, a consulting firm. The name of the company was Next Chapter Holdings. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. He'd been billing Innovate Dynamics for consulting services that never happened, approving his own fraudulent invoices and funneling millions of dollars into Next Chapter's accounts. That money had paid for Chloe's apartment before she moved into my house, her car, their lavish vacations, the diamond bracelet I saw on her wrist in that Instagram photo. It was the seed money for their new life, stolen from the company we had built together. He used it to set her up, I murmured, staring at a flowchart that showed the river of money flowing from my life's work into his affair. And himself, Mr. Franklin corrected gently. There are offshore accounts, real estate holdings in the Caymans. He wasn't just leaving you, he was building an empire on the ruins of yours. The paper trail is immaculate. He got sloppy. He thought no one would ever look this closely. Mr. Franklin tapped the cover of the report. This is more than enough for the IRS to take a very, very keen interest. We're talking tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement. He won't just lose the company, Mrs. Adams. He could lose his freedom. I took the report. It felt heavier than a legal document. It felt like justice. I paid Mr. Franklin, thanked him for his thoroughness, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in a year, I felt the warmth on my skin. I went home, showered, and put on the one good suit I had kept, a simple dark gray sheath dress and jacket, power armor. I drove my 10-year-old sedan not to a lawyer's office, not to the police, but back to the gleaming glass tower of Innovate Dynamics. The security guard in the lobby, a man named George, who I'd always shared a coffee with, did a double take. Mrs. Adams, it's good to see you. His eyes were full of the same pity I'd been seeing for weeks. It's good to be back, George, I said, my voice steady. I walked to the reception desk. The young woman there, someone Chloe had no doubt hired, looked up. Can I help you? I placed my hand on the cool marble of the desk, the heavy weight of the report in my briefcase anchoring me to the spot. Mark and Chloe thought they had everything. They were probably in my old office upstairs, celebrating their unassailable victory. They were wrong. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of mine. Yes, I said, giving the receptionist a polite, unwavering smile. I don't have an appointment, but I need to see David Chen in accounting. Tell him Hope is here. Tell him I've brought the audit. David Chen was the company's chief financial officer, a man I had personally hired a decade ago. He was brilliant, meticulous, and pathologically honest. I knew if Mark was cooking the books, David would be the one forced to hold the pan, and he would hate every second of it. The receptionist spoke into her headset, her eyes wide as she relayed my message. A moment later, she nodded. He'll be right down. When the elevator doors opened, David looked like a ghost. He was pale, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. He saw me and stopped dead. It wasn't the look of a co-conspirator. It was the look of a man who had been waiting for the executioner and was shocked to see a rescue party instead. "Hope," he whispered, his voice hoarse. I didn't say a word. I simply held up the corner of the bound report so he could see the Franklin and Bell logo. A wave of something relief, terror, vindication washed over his face. He sagged against the wall for a second before straightening his tie, a soldier ready for his orders. "The board," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We need to call an emergency meeting. Standard protocol for a C-level forensic audit. It's mandatory." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the same conference room where I had signed away my life. This time, the mood was different. The entire executive board was present, most of them looking confused and irritated at being summoned so abruptly. Mark and Chloe sat at the head of the table, their annoyance barely concealed. Mark tried to take control immediately. "All right, David. What's so important it couldn't wait for the quarterly meeting? Some of us have a business to run." David didn't answer. He just looked at me. That was my cue. I stood up, the heavy report in my hands. "Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't remember me, I'm Hope Adams. I co-founded this company." A nervous ripple went through the room. Mark's face hardened into a mask of fury. "Hope, what is the meaning of this? You have no right to be here." "Actually, I do," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "As part of the dissolution agreement, I requested a final audit of the company's financials. I believe you all received a copy in your emails about 5 minutes ago, courtesy of David." I watched as laptops opened and phones lit up. I saw brows furrow, then eyes widen in shock. The color drained from Mark's face. Chloe, sitting beside him, looked from the panicked expressions around the table to Mark's ashen face, confusion turning to dawning horror. "The audit," I continued, placing the physical copy on the table with a solid, definitive thud, "was conducted by Franklin and Bell. They found discrepancies. A shell corporation called Next Chapter Holdings, fraudulent invoices totaling just over $12 million over 3 years, money funneled to offshore accounts and used to fund a certain lifestyle." My eyes flicked to the diamond bracelet on Chloe's wrist. She instinctively covered it with her other hand. "This is insane," Mark stammered, finally finding his voice. He was on his feet, his hands splayed on the table. "She's a bitter, scorned woman making up lies." "The wire transfers are not lies, Mr. Adams," David said, his voice ringing with newfound confidence. "Neither are the signed invoices, your signature on every single one." It all unraveled so quickly. The board, faced with irrefutable evidence of massive fraud that put them all at legal risk, turned on him like a pack of wolves. His blustering denials withered under the cold, hard data on their screens. Chloe started crying, not out of any sense of remorse, but from the raw terror of a gold digger who had just struck pyrite. She looked at Mark, not with love, but with accusation. He had promised her a kingdom, and now the castle was on fire. By the time the men in dark suits with badges on their belts walked into the conference room, a call I'd made from the lobby, it was all over. Mark didn't even resist. He just stood there, a hollowed-out man, as they read him his rights. He had won the house, the business, the girl, and in one perfectly orchestrated morning, he lost it all. They took him away in handcuffs. The last I saw of Chloe, she was being questioned by a stern-faced woman, her mascara-streaked face a perfect portrait of consequence. The board offered me everything back, my shares, the CEO position, a massive apology bonus. I politely declined. I didn't want the old life back. I had fought for justice, not for a return to a gilded cage. I took a modest settlement enough to be comfortable and walked away for good. That was 6 months ago. The news said Mark took a plea bargain. He'll be in a low-security federal prison for the next 7 to 10 years. Chloe is working as a hostess at a restaurant downtown. I saw her once through the window. The house was seized by the IRS to help pay back taxes. As for me, I'm still in my little apartment above the flower shop. I used the settlement to start a small consulting firm of my own, helping other female entrepreneurs navigate the brutal startup world. It's small, it's mine, and it's honest. This morning I bought a single rose bush from the shop downstairs. It's a peace rose with pale yellow and pink petals. I planted it in a pot on my tiny balcony. As I patted the soil around its base, I smiled. I hadn't needed the grand garden after all. All I ever really needed was a little patch of earth to call my own and the freedom to grow whatever I wanted. And for the first time in a very long time, I was free.